on your cameras, we are privileged to have an auspicious guest with us, perhaps my favorite historian, Nell Irvin
Hey.
Painter, and I will tell you why she is my favorite, but I won't divulge too much about her career because obviously she is going to share on her career as a historian. But it's there is an interesting relationship between historians and between authors and their audiences. I've read so many of Dr. Painter's books so many times that I feel like I know Dr. Painter. So Dr. Painter has written one of my favorite biographies, which is Sojourner Truth, A Life, a Symbol. She has written one of my favorite period studies, which is Standing at Armageddon. She has written one of my favorite textbooks, which is Creating Black Americans.
Yay.
And she has written one of my favorite books on white people, which is A History of White People. So she covers the spectrum, she covers the gamut, and I just want you all to give her a warm Howard University welcome. Please give her a warm Howard University welcome. If we can see hearts and hands and all the good
Great.
accoutrements that Zoom has, we want to thank you for being here, Dr. Painter. Before you begin, Dr. Painter, if we will please allow the Howard History Department Chair, Dr. Frederick Knight. Dr. Knight, thank you so much for being with us. We also want to give a warm welcome to Dr. Knight. And Dr. Knight, you can just please say a word before Dr. Painter begins.
Oh, first of all, thank you for informing me about this. As soon as I heard about this, I knew that I had to show up. And I actually have, pulled these off of my bookcase this morning, standing up again. I've been carrying this around from state to state as I've moved from Colorado to California to Memphis, Virginia. This is probably covered 5,000 or so miles, maybe more, in creating African Americans. So we're so honored for you to be here and to spend your time with our students. I'm sure it's going to be enriching as you take them along your intellectual journey. This is Howard University at its finest. I want to thank Dr. Baker also for extending the invitation to you. This is a powerful intellectual community with a rich intellectual tradition, and we're really honored for you to participate and to add to our students' learning. So again, we thank you so much, Dr. Painter. Thank you again, Dr. Baker, for creating this opportunity for our students to learn from one of the giants, one of the really true giants and pioneers in the field of African-American history. Again, we're very honored to have you here. I have other things to attend to, Dr. Painter. I would love to be able to stay here on the whole call, but there's urgent matters I have to take care of. So, but again, thank you for coming, and hopefully this is not the last of our engagement with you.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Knight. And Dr. Painter, the floor is all yours.
Thank you. Well, it's really a pleasure to be with you. I want to make one explanation. I am sitting here in the Adirondack Mountains of far northern New York. I had hoped to be able to speak to you from the screen porch and you would have a backdrop of the forest. But my screen porch is at 52 degrees this morning, so it's not exactly welcoming. So I am inside. I am in my own workroom, which is a little sparse now because I had closed it down at the end of the summer. And you may hear some worker noises because we are having a heat pump, which will give us air conditioning downstairs. So you may hear some of those noises. I have an external mic with me. Hopefully that will screen out some of the outside noises. But at any rate, global warming has caught up with us, and we are unfortunately having to add air conditioning in the Adirondack Mountains, something we never thought would happen. So I should say that I met Professor Baker through his work on Adventism and Millerites and Black Millerites, because at one point, Sojourner Truth, and I'm assuming you all know, you all recognize the name Sojourner Truth. Sojourner Truth was with Millerites. And like as Professor Baker taught me, many Black Americans before the Civil War, and in fact after the Civil War, are in their heart or in their church homes Adventists. That is, believing that the world is going to end pretty soon. So that's how we got together, because two of his articles were extremely useful to me. I am currently writing a new book on Sojourner Truth called Sojourner Truth Was a New Yorker, and She Didn't Say That. If you want me to tell you more about that book, I will. But for now, let me just say that I was so pleased when Professor Baker invited me to join you. This is really a pleasure. Now, I am an old lady from Oakland, California, which means that when I was growing up in the 20th century, I was not a what was considered a typical Black person, because if you were a Black person, you were supposed to be from the South. I was not from the South. And at one point in my career, I taught at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And I learned not only am I not from the South, I am constitutionally not a Southerner. I don't have a lot of reverence for the past. I love the past. I love doing historical research. I love writing history. I love everything about history, but I don't embrace it. And so many of the people I knew and even loved in the South embraced that history, for better or worse. But I did not identify with it. And so, and also they were, many of my friends were politically much more conservative than I. I grew up in a left-leaning household, and I did not have, I knew about the unsavory parts of American history as a young person. I did not grow up thinking that the United States was the be all and end all and the most wonderful country, unlike any other country in the world, and so forth. So I grew up in a left-leaning household in the Bay Area.
I think Dr. Painter froze. Hopefully she will unfreeze. Is she frozen on you all's end?
Yes.
Yes.
Weird.
Okay.
Hmm.
Yes, Dr. Painter, we just had a slight blip, but you should be fine now.
Are you okay now?
Yes, we're okay now.
Okay. I see that my internet is okay, so maybe it's at your end. At any rate, I spent formative years in my youth, when I was your age, outside the United States. I spent 2 years in Ghana in the mid-60s. How many of you know the name Kwame Nkrumah? Put your hand up if you know that name. Okay, some of you do, but a lot of you don't. Very quickly, in the 1960s, Ghana was one of the first formerly colonized countries to gain independence. And Kwame Nkrumah was the first president. Kwame Nkrumah embraced Pan-Africanism. He wrote a book called Africa Must Unite. And he was also very left-leaning. He felt that in order for his country and other African countries to prosper, they needed to be socialist. So my lefty family, we went to Ghana to make the socialist revolution in West Africa. And it was quite an education for me. It was not my first time in Africa, but was my first extended time. I had spent a summer in northern Nigeria with Crossroads Africa, building a school with our African counterparts outside of Kano. This was the first time I had ever spent extended time with Africans who were Muslim. Um, I grew up on the campus of the University of California, Berkeley. My father was the longtime chief technician of chemistry, and we often hosted foreign students, often hosted students from Africa. And one of our dear friends was from Ghana, actually. When we first knew him, his name was Ben Kofi, but he soon embraced his Ghanaian name. Uh, and so he, I knew people who were from Africa. I had a very dear friend, a boyfriend actually, from Nigeria. And so when I went to Ghana, I knew actual people. We were not going to embrace our heartland. We didn't get off the airplane saying, "Oh brother, oh sister." It was really a much more political thing. But what I learned in those 2 years in Ghana was a lot about politics and economics, because even growing up in the Bay Area, so much, and this is in the middle of the century, growing up in the Bay Area, so much of how I situated myself in events or in time had to do with race. I really was a Black American or an African American or a Negro with a capital N. And when that way of orienting my thought disappeared in Ghana, I at first was totally lost. But then I began to see what I understood or what I understand as some of the leading questions about politics and economics and societies. And for instance, what are the trade-offs in development between how much money actual people have and what are the overreaching ideals, say, of socialism? So we could see with the people around us how those trade-offs worked out. I was there when a coup d'etat deposed Kwame Nkrumah, and we left shortly afterwards. The most famous person in that community of African Americans was Maya Angelou. And she also, of course, left. She went to Egypt and then came to back to the United States. She had grown up. I fear it's telling me my internet connection is unstable, so I hope you're not losing me.
No, you're fine. We hear you.
Good. And she became one of the most famous 20th century Americans. And she actually wrote about her time in Ghana. All God's children got traveling shoes. So after that, I came back to the United States, sowed some wild oats, um, and then went to Harvard for my PhD. So I got my PhD in 1974, before your parents were born. Um, And my field was the history of the American South, because I was interested in how questions of development played out. And the American South after the Civil War was one place where you could see that happening. So that was my first book. It was my dissertation and my first book. It's called Exodusters: Black Migration to Kansas After Reconstruction. What I discovered was that many people had to leave home on account of terrorism. It was terrorism that ended Reconstruction. It was violence. It was extra-legal political violence. And so this dissertation in this book, I thought I was writing long ago history. But recently, people have been telling me they are reading Exodusters, Black Migration to Kansas After Reconstruction, almost as a roadmap to what's going on now. And political violence, terrorism is the key that makes people feel that they are seeing what happened back then as a return. So that was my first book. My second book is an oral autobiography of a Black communist in Birmingham, Alabama. He joined the Communist Party in 1931, and he stayed a communist. Hosea Hudson is his name. He stayed a communist until he died at 90 in 1988. So this was his story of a Black working man, urban working man in Birmingham, Alabama. That was my second book, and I think it's still my favorite book. My third book was Standing in Armageddon, which Professor Baker mentioned, the United States, 1877 to 1919. That book came out in its third edition last year. Um, and then my next book was Sojourner Truth, A Life, a Symbol, which came out in its second edition last year. I got started on Sojourner Truth asking a question. In your mind's eye, can you see an image of Sojourner Truth? Put your hand up if you can see an image of Sojourner Truth in your mind's eye. So several of you. So you recognize the portrait, and she had her photographs taken, so she posed in the way she wanted to. And she's looking very well composed. She's well dressed. She's not agitated. She's not making a big story about an injury to her hand that occurred while she was enslaved. She is sitting, she's a bourgeoise. But at the same time, whenever I saw images of her with a caption, it would be, aren't I a woman or ain't I a woman? And she's this fiery person and she's telling people off and she's thumping on people. And I thought, how do these two things go together? How do I put together what I know of her words? And it turns out, as I did research, those were not her words, but they circulated as her words. There's a representation of Sojourner Truth with her self-fashion, her self-presentation as this calm, settled person who incidentally is holding her knitting. And I am a knitter. And in my new book, there will be a chapter on Sojourner Truth, knitter. So how did these two go together? And so that's how the book worked out. It turned out that Sojourner Truth did not say, aren't I a woman or ain't I a woman? Ain't I a woman being the 20th century reworking of aren't I a woman, presumably to make it sound more Black, more Negro, and probably more Southern, because most people who know a little bit about Sojourner Truth assumed that she was a Southerner because she had been enslaved. She was enslaved in New York State, in the Hudson Valley, in Ulster County, um, and slavery existed in New York until 1827. So it's a story that most people didn't know, even if they knew a little bit about her. So that was my what? Uh, fourth book? Something like that. Yeah. And then I wrote a book that is kind of hard to get your hands on, but well worth getting your hands on if you can. It's a narrative history of Black Americans. It's called Creating Black Americans, um, African American History and Its Meanings, 1619 to the present. And I call it Creating Black Americans because for me, Black history, African American history, is what Black people make, say, do. What has been done to us is, for me, American history. So creating Black Americans is about what Black people have done, said, um, and all the images are Black fine art. So it's a kind of a quick and dirty history of Black art as well. And when it came out in 2006, Black art and Black artists were much less known than they are now, and many people used it as an introduction to Black art. So creating Black Americans, that for me is Black history. Let's see, after that came the history of white people. And I had to work on that book for 10 years because I knew that it had to be absolutely perfect. And so there's tens of pages of notes and citations because I call them prophylactic footnotes because they were kind of the armor to protect me against people saying, oh, this is not good history. It is really good history. And that one also got started from a question. It got started at the turn of the 21st century when the when Russians were trying to bring the Caucasus under control, and they bombed the Grozny, which is the capital of Chechnya. And the picture of bombed Grozny was on the front page of the New York Times. At the time, we were living in Princeton, and we were getting the New York Times every day at our door. Um, and here was this bombed out place. It looked like Berlin in 1945. And it was in the Caucasus. And I thought to myself, well, why are white Americans called Chechens? Why are white Americans called Caucasian? So that was the beginning of that book. Why are white Americans called Chechens? Why are white Americans called Caucasians? Um, and I discovered it had to do with a, a professor at the University of Göttingen in Germany who was one of the pioneers of race science and decided that there were five real races, and the prettiest was Caucasian. The prettiest and beauty was part of the way that he ranked the races, which was not uncommon. In fact, the various ways of measuring people to sort them into races often has to do with how beautiful they are. So that was 2010, and that was a big job. Now, by this time, I had received probably all of the honors I was going to get, and I had done a lot of historical writing. Sojourner Truth, with her photographs, had taken me into one of the beauties of Princeton University, which is the Art History Library. And the art, I just loved being over there, I was researching what's called the rhetoric of the image, and I just loved it. And I thought, I want to spend more time with images. I want to make my own. So I left Princeton. I went to Rutgers University. I got a BFA in painting at Mason Gross School of the Arts. And then I went to the Rhode Island School of Design and I got an MFA in painting at RISD. And so now I do two things. I make art and I still write books. So right now, after I talk to you, I'm going down to Saratoga Springs to Yaddo, which is a wonderful artist residency. And I am going to do some more writing on Sojourner Truth was a New Yorker. And I'm also going to make new art. Now, last year I published, which a book is a collection of my essays with my art called I Just Keep Talking. And as you have heard, I do just keep talking. I have never considered myself a typical Black person or even a representative Black person. And that has given me a measure of freedom to do and say and create whatever I want. I was very lucky with my parents and my family. So I was never under pressure to do something that would make money or make me much more respectable in that way. So I've had the gift of freedom, which I am very grateful for.
Thank you so much, Dr. Painter. I want to ask you all if you will prepare your questions for Dr. Painter. We have about 20 minutes to ask questions. And so if you will please, you can put your questions in the chat, or you can raise your hands and I will acknowledge you and you can ask your questions. I will start it. I will start it out. Dr. Painter, you are a trendsetter. And I've seen how you have taken things that you have found interesting, and maybe at the time they weren't interesting to historians, or at least historians weren't talking
Yes,
about them,
yes.
and you made them interesting to us.
Well, I made them interesting to me. And
Okay.
then a few years later, others came along. One of the gifts I have, two gifts I have. One, I have always found a publisher because to get your word out, you need a publisher of some sort. Um, that's the first thing. And the New York Times has reviewed my books so people can know about them. That said, very often they did not catch on immediately. So, for instance, The History of White People, which came out in 2010, never won a single book prize.
Hmm.
It never has. Um, and so that book made its own way. But it also was reviewed on the front page of the New York Times Book Review, which let people know about it.
Yes, yes. We do have a question in the chat for you. I will read it.
Yeah.
A young history major, Sage Savandro, says your work is incredible. What is your
Thank.
biggest advice for Black women going into the history field?
Okay. First of all, who are you? Part of you, and it's up to you how big a part of you that is a Black woman. And part of you is yourself. What do you like to do? What are you good at? What do you have money to do? What do you have time to do? So the first question is about you. The next question, unfortunately, I don't have the book in front of me because it's in New Jersey, about a year or so ago, I blurbed a book that was written to answer the very question you asked, because there are situations, problems, frustrations, rewards that will come to you as a Black woman. And one of the sad things in my life is that some of the same frustrations my students, and then the students of my students, and then the students of students of my students keep facing the same shit. So unfortunately, I can't give you the title of that book, but please know that when you run into ugly situations that you can't explain, talk to somebody else, because sometimes those are because you are a Black woman. So, um, my advice, ask yourself what you like to do, ask yourself what you can do, ask yourself what you have money to do, ask yourself what you have time to do, and do that. Have allies, have mentors, talk to people.
Thank you. We have a question from Amari Stevenson. Amari, if you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, hello. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Amari Stevenson. I'm a junior history major. And I just wanted to ask you, since you're an expert in Sojourner Truth, in one of my other classes, we were talking about like the intention of the white woman who changed her words for the Ain't I a Woman speech.
Yeah.
So part of the class thought that she did it for like a nefarious reason, like maybe to make Black people seem dumb. But then I thought that she was probably just trying to help. But a lot of times when white people try to help, sometimes it ends up backfiring and actually hurting. So I was wondering what you think her intentions were based on your research.
Yeah, good question. I answered that question in Sojourner Truth, A Life is Symbol. I'll answer it even building on your question, actually, in the book I'm writing now. And what I'm saying is that there are two sources of knowledge here about Sojourner Truth. One is history and the historical record, and the historical record is in standard English. And so lots of Americans don't want their Black people to speak standard English because it doesn't sound authentic. The other is art. So Frances Dana Gage was a journalist. She was making art. She was talking back to Harriet Beecher Stowe, who was a writer, who was an artist, who published what the historian Margaret Washington calls Sojourner Truth in blackface, which was a fancy. If you know anything about Uncle Tom's Cabin, you can imagine what Harriet Beecher Stowe did to Sojourner Truth. So Frances Dana Gage, who had good bona fides in feminism and anti-slavery, said, she had a better Sojourner Truth. She made up the refrain, "Aren't I a woman?" And in 19th century, "Aren't I a woman?" 20th century has changed "aren't" to "ain't," presumably to make it sound more authentic. So we're another step away from the history. We are into art, and then we're into culture, what culture wants from a Black figure. So I don't say that Frances Dana Gage was mean or nefarious. She was making art. And I want you to be able to distinguish art from history. Art is great. Art can help us see, help us ask questions, but it's not the same thing as history. So, "Aren't I a Woman" is not history, it's art. "Ain't I a Woman" is not history, it's culture built on art.
Thank you, Dr. Painter. Janaya.
Hi, good morning, Dr. Painter. It's so nice to meet you,
Let me
and thank
find
you
you.
for
There you go. Yeah.
coming to our class today. My name is Janiyah McCray. I'm a senior biology major with a double minor in Spanish and history from
Wow.
Burlington, New Jersey.
From
Yeah.
what exit?
Um, I'm exit 47. hmm but anyway, I really had a historical awakening when I came to Howard, coming from predominantly white schools and neighborhoods. I really didn't have too much Black history education until maybe my senior year of high school and then Howard. So I found myself having a lot of sort of tough moments when I'm realizing the truth behind a lot of Black history, especially when it comes to Black women and enslavement. And so I'm just wondering if you've ever had that sort of historical awakening when you entered a new space, maybe a Black space, and then also how you deal with those tough moments and sort of overcome them.
Mhm. Well, like you, I grew up in mostly white surroundings, but with Pan-African parents, I did have a counterweight. So I always knew that my high school history was a pack of lies. So I tested out of the requirement for American history at the University of California because I considered it a pack of lies. And I had other alternatives. That was the big thing. Um, but that doesn't, that only answers part of your question. Um, One of my big frustrations now is what I hear young people, especially young Black women, telling me is that history has nothing for Black people, which really hurts my heart because people, mostly Black people, have been writing the history since the 19th century. The first big history is George Washington Williams's history from 1898, I think, 1899. You know, it's the turn of the 20th century. And people have been writing the history before the civil rights era, before the 21st century. A lot of that was in specialized journals like the Journal of Negro History, which did not circulate widely. But what I want to say here is that historians, mostly Black, have been doing the work. If you think there is no history, you have not done the research. The research is there. So I am not an Afro-pessimist. I do not believe that our situation is the same as it was in Sojourner Truth's time, or even the same as it was in my parents' 20th century time. That doesn't say that that everything is hunky-dory, not at all. Um, but the history is there. All you need to do is the research. You have a lot on your plate. You're doing a lot of studying. But if you have a particular question, you can ask Google, you can ask AI, and they will get you started. The history is there. Historians have been doing the work.
We have a question from the chat from Yasmin. What is your process when conducting historical research? What are some things you look for?
Okay. The first thing is that I start with a question, not an answer. And so I told you a couple of questions for Sojourner Truth and for History of White People. I don't know where I'm going at the beginning. So step one leads to step two, leads to step three, leads to step four, and so forth. So it's a process in that way. I also revise endlessly. One of the great things about computers is that I can revise endlessly. So I work on composition, I work on organization. Organization can change as I learn more or I discovered that different parts of the story go in different places. So that's the beauty of using a computer. Sometimes I also write by hand. because that slows me down. And writing by hand actually brings up questions that don't come through the keyboard. So I work both ways. And finally, as I'm writing, so with the book that I'm working on now, I started with a rough outline of about 14 chapters. So far, 3 of those chapters have divided. So there's chapter 2 is chapter 2.1 and chapter 2.2. Um, Chapter 6 is chapter 6.1 and chapter 6.2. The one I'm working on now, chapter 9 is chapter 9.1 and chapter 9.2. But every day on the computer, I start a new document. I mean, it's the document from yesterday, but I give it today's date and I save it as today's date document. So I always know where I am. And then um, sometimes I have to save an old version because it has stuff in it that I want to keep, but I haven't put in the new version. But mostly I trash the previous versions and only keep the up-to-date version. But with a date on the document, I know where I am.
Thank you, Dr. Painter. We have a question from Jalen. Jalen asks, how did your life experiences, your work, and the modern day experience shape your understanding of being a Black American? And Jalen's asking this from the perspective, he's interested in studying the formation of the Black American ethnic identity, and particularly with language.
Yeah.
So if you could talk a little bit about
Okay.
what shaped your view of being a
Sure.
Black American.
Okay. I last year this time I was in Berlin at the American Academy in Berlin, and I gave a talk called My Elsewheres. And I've alluded to this to the importance of having lived outside the United States in shaping the way I think. So I will send Jalen to the American Academy in Berlin and to my talk last year called My Elsewheres. And I don't know if I'm going to do a book about that. Um, Sometimes I feel like the current book on Sojourner Truth is my last book. And sometimes I feel like I want to do a book called My Elsewheres. Anyway, that um, would give a sense of what changed the way or how what influenced the way I work. Um, if Jalen were my student, I would not let him use the pronoun, not the pronoun, the, because we are millions of people. And even in the 20th century, when most Black Americans had deep roots in the United States. That has changed dramatically since the turn of the 21st century. And now some enormous percentage, like a third or something, of Black Americans are either immigrants or the children of immigrants. And that's a different demographic. It's a different culture. Even in my time, people who were Black, who were from the West, were different from people who were Black from the South, who were different from people who were Black from the Midwest and from the East, and so forth. So I would not I mean, what am I going to do about this? I would discourage the use of the with any any group of people who number in the millions, and and especially with historical roots as deep as ours.
Thank you, Dr. Painter. And I will find that talk and send the students a link to it. My Elsewheres,
Yes.
you gave
Yeah.
in Berlin. Thank you
Yes.
for that. Just
American Academy in Berlin.
okay. And last question, I will pose it. What advice would you give us as budding historians? Let's say ages 18 to 23. What advice would
Yeah.
you give us?
Well, first of all, I would thank you for your love and your engagement in history. I think it's a way of preserving our sanity in these terrible times. And it's also absolutely fascinating. It's fascinating on the demographic level, it's fascinating on the biographical level. There is just so much. You know, when I used to go to history meetings, I would walk through the book exhibits, and I think, oh my God, there's too many books. Why don't historians stop writing books? There's too many books. And then every time I'd sit and talk with somebody, I think, you know, somebody ought to do a book about that. So we have an infinite supply of likely topics. And as the time and the place and the field, as the focus of our interests change, there's so much more. So I would keep saying, do what interests you and do it well. Do your research.
Thank you so much, Dr. Painter. And if we all can give Dr. Painter our love, thank you so much,
Thank
Dr. Painter,
you.
for
It's really
coming.
been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for the
The
questions.
pleasure has been all ours. Dr. Painter, please take care of yourself and thank you so much for sharing with us.
You're very welcome. Bye-bye.